I, 27, female, got divorced from my husband, 28, male, of 2 years a couple of months ago. I caught him cheating on me with a friend of mine, and that had been the end of our marriage. I got the house and the car and have cut all ties with him since then. I recently also adopted a puppy, and he happens to be a really rare and expensive breed. A friend's dog had babies, and I decided to adopt one around a month ago, and I love him to the moon and back already. I've even hired a dog sitter to take care of him when I'm away at work since I don't want to leave him alone. But around 4 days back, my brother, 29, male, visited me and demanded that I give up my dog so that he could sell it and earn some extra cash. My brother is never up to any good, and even though he's almost hitting 30, he still acts like a high school stoner. He can't hold down a job and still has to borrow money from our parents every month to pay his bills, since all his own money goes into paying for pot. And since it's decriminalized in our state, it's not even like we can put an end to it somehow. My parents have pretty much given up hope and let him do his thing. Their duty as parents is to make sure he stays alive and fed, and they do that even though at his age he should be looking out for himself. It's a disaster. But coming back to what happened, my brother had already known about my dog since he'd seen my post on social media. He showed up and demanded that I pay him back by giving him my dog. I was confused as hell because I didn't understand what he meant by pay him back. I told him to go away because my puppy is the single most precious thing in my life right now, and my brother shouldn't expect anything from me. I'm not his mom. When I refused and said that I'd push him out of my house if he didn't leave on his own, which is a real threat because I'm a lot stronger than him, he started talking about how ungrateful I was and even said that he'd report me for theft. Apparently, he'd invested $10,000 in me. And if he wasn't going to get the money back, then the least I could do for him was give him my dog so that he could sell it and make some quick cash. I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about and kicked him out because I thought he was high or something. But he kept saying the same thing over and over again for the next couple of days as well. I finally got really pissed off and responded to his text by telling him to stop, because I didn't believe a word of what he was saying. I did think he was just bluffing to get some money out of me, but then he said I should ask my ex-husband and maybe then I will believe him. Now, that's when things got shady because when it comes to my ex-husband, I think it's best to believe that he's capable of anything. He's not very transparent about money, and I'd started keeping tabs on his expenses when he tried to borrow some money from me, which is how I found out about his affair in the first place. I don't wear anything under a size 6, so I knew that there was something fishy going on. He'd been running out of money since his girlfriend's demands were always extravagant, and the numerous work trips that he'd been taking were all luxury vacations with his mistress, so obviously he was going broke. He couldn't let her know that, though, since it'd be such a huge turnoff, so he resorted to borrowing money. I lent him $5,000 one time, and yeah, he had borrowed that amount from my brother. I'd finally unblocked and got back in touch with him just to confirm this yesterday. When I asked him about this, he tried to deny it eventually, but after a while, he confessed that he had indeed borrowed 10 grand from my brother. He told him that I was the one who needed the money since I wanted to join a business school and get a degree now. I don't know if my brother was high at the time or maybe he's just plain stupid because he agreed to give my ex the money, completely forgetting about the fact that I already have a degree and have been through business school. He'd been high throughout that time, so I guess he just forgot about it. I was furious, but tried to keep my temper under control and asked my husband where he'd spent the money, even though I already knew the answer to that. I wasn't even surprised when he told me that he'd given the money to his girlfriend because she needed it to invest in her own small business. My husband had refused to help me out last year when I'd said I wanted to start my own business, saying that we didn't have enough money, but were ready to borrow money from his brother-in-law for his girlfriend's business. I felt angry, But there was no point in trying to argue with him about things that didn't matter anymore, so I let it slide. Instead, I told him that he needed to pay my brother back at the earliest because he was bothering me now, and I didn't want any trouble. My ex started whining about how that wasn't fair and he still needed some more time to get his finances sorted out after the divorce, as if it was my fault. He even had the audacity to say that I'd taken the house and the car, so I owe him some kindness at the very least. The audacity to say that to me after he'd cheated on me. I told him that I didn't owe him anything at all and that he needed to sort out this mess that he'd created with my brother as soon as possible. We got into an argument about this when he said that he couldn't afford to pay my brother back right now, and I just have to deal with this. Then he hung up and blocked me, so I haven't been able to get through to him since then. I don't even know where he lives now, so I can't get in touch with him in person either. I suggested that my brother go to the cops instead because the money wasn't even spent on me as far as I know. So I don't know how it was fair for him to demand the money from me. He wasn't willing to go to the cops because the money was all in cash and he didn't have any proof of anything, so it'd be pretty pointless. He didn't want to waste his time going to the cops and he wanted me to either pay him back or give him my dog. I told him that I'll be doing neither, but that got him really flustered because he needed the money and believed that I was the reason he was in trouble right now. I still don't understand how any of this is my fault at all. This entire transaction had taken place without my knowledge, behind my back, between my ex-husband and my brother, and I'm not close to either of them anymore. I don't see why I should be held responsible for this mess. AITA for refusing to pay my brother back for money that my ex-husband borrowed from him? Update 1. I told my parents about my brother and the way he was harassing me for money yesterday. I didn't intend on bothering them with this, but I couldn't take this anymore. He's been calling and texting me every day for a week now. And when I blocked his number, he got several new ones and has even been telling his stoner friends to do the same so that I pay him back. And my ex-husband had blocked me, so I couldn't get to him anyway. I was at a complete loss, so I got my parents involved. I really couldn't do anything else. I feel bad because they're getting old and shouldn't have to deal with the problems of 2 grown children, but here we are. My dad sounded disappointed when I filled him in on what was happening, but he told me that he'll take care of it. I feel awful that this is happening because in spite of everything, he still is my brother and I do care about him deep down. He's just let us all down so often and so much that it gets hard to remember that. Anyway, I hope my parents deal with this and things get better. Update 2. Hey guys, I've been really stressed out for the past couple of days because of the stuff that's been going on with my family. My brother is in big trouble apparently. He really did need the money. He got in trouble with some dealers because he hasn't been able to pay them off for all the stuff he bought from them and had been struggling with money anyway since he'd borrowed the 10 grand from the streets in the first place. He hasn't even been eating enough, and we realized that only when he moved back home to live with my parents. I hadn't noticed how emaciated he looked because he'd been wearing oversized clothes when he came to visit me, but then, a few days back when I visited him at my parents' house, I realized how skinny he'd gotten over time, and it really broke my heart. After I told my parents that he was harassing me for money, they'd called him several times to speak to him, but he hadn't answered, so they decided to pay him a visit. We stopped visiting my brother ages ago because it was always messy at his place and it reeked of pot, so it was disgusting. But my parents were left with no other option than to go to him personally, since he hadn't been answering any calls and they were getting worried about him. He'd been hiding in his room, scared out of his mind, and probably facing withdrawal symptoms because for the first time since he turned 16, he didn't have any pot for himself. My parents had to drag him out of his den to bring him back home so they could keep an eye on him. They've paid off his debts and are trying to get him the medical attention that he most definitely needs. I feel terrible for him, but I'm happy that he's at least going to get better now. I guess we really dropped the ball when it came to him as a family, and now we're doing our best to bring him back to life. As for my ex-husband, I still have no idea where he is or what he's up to, but I'm trying to find out so that I can get him to pay us back those 10 grand. I don't know if it's going to help, but he can't just borrow money from my family and run away with it so he can be with his girlfriend. I'm trying to get in contact with his friends and coworkers to find out where he is right now. His family is definitely not going to rat him out, so there's no point in trying to talk to them. I don't know what I'm going to do even if I do find him, but I just know that I want to get back at him somehow. I'm angry about everything and it all needs an outlet, so he's going to be my punching bag, and I don't feel particularly bad about it either. He deserves this. Update 3. I finally found my ex-husband. I was about to give up 2 days back, but then one of his friends finally got back to me when I said that I needed to speak to him urgently. He believed it and ended up sharing his address with me. I didn't want to waste any more time, and I drove over to the address he'd given me the next morning itself to speak to my ex-husband. We hadn't seen each other in months, so I was prepared for it to be awkward, but when I pulled up to that house and saw that they had 2 cars, I realized that he'd been living with the woman he'd been cheating on me with. My friend from school, who'd stabbed me in the back by hooking up with my husband, was also going to be here. And that kind of threw me off for a few minutes, and I hesitated to confront him. But then I kept my feelings aside and went ahead to speak to him because, after all, he was the one who'd done me wrong and not the other way around. He cheated on me and he'd taken an exorbitant amount of money from me and my brother, so now he was the one who should feel nervous. As for my so-called friend, I didn't care about her because she honestly just wasn't even worth it. She didn't exist for me. So I went ahead and knocked on his door, but he refused to open up. He probably knew that it was me from the intercom or door hole. I didn't leave and continued to bang on the door until he finally opened up, and he even had the audacity to look annoyed. I didn't care, though, and got straight to the point. I told him that he needed to pay me the money back right now, and I wasn't going to leave until he did. If he could afford to live in such a nice house with his girlfriend, then he could definitely afford to pay back the amount that he'd borrowed, and I wasn't going to take no for an answer. He argued with me and said that I was being unreasonable right now, and even his girlfriend tried to side with him and said that she'd call the cops if I didn't leave, but I wasn't going to be intimidated by that. They were the ones at fault right now, and besides, I knew that they didn't have the guts to actually call the cops. They didn't know for sure if they themselves could get into trouble over this, and until they were absolutely certain that they could get off scot-free, they wouldn't do anything to put themselves in danger as well. So I stayed there and told them straight up that I wasn't leaving until I got my money back. They continued to argue with me for a while, but then gave up and started requesting me to give them some time to put the money together and claimed that they were struggling with money. I really found that hard to believe because their house looked pretty nice and well furnished, and I could see the expensive watch and earrings that my ex, his girlfriend, was sporting respectively. If anyone's struggling with money, then they won't just be casually wearing such expensive stuff at home, so I absolutely didn't buy their excuse of being too poor to pay me back. They definitely did have the money, but just didn't want to pay me back. I don't know how they were affording this lifestyle, but I didn't care enough to find out either. I just wanted my money back so I could be done with this crap. Eventually, they agreed to hand over 5 grand that day itself and promised to pay the rest back in a few days, since they didn't just have 10 grand lying around, but that wouldn't do. I wanted the entire amount that day itself. I didn't have the time nor the energy to drive back and forth from their house again and again. Their house was quite a distance from mine, and I didn't want to leave my dog alone for such long stretches of time. After around an hour and a half of arguing and negotiating, they finally gave up and told me they'd pay me off and even cuss me out, but it was worth it. At least I got my money back. Yeah, I had to wait at their house for a while since both of them had left to withdraw the money, but at least I got it all back. Once he'd handed it all over to me, my ex-husband told me that he never wanted to see me again, and that if I ever showed up at his house to harass him again, then he really would report me to the police. I wasn't scared, but I didn't want to drag that conversation out anymore, so I didn't respond to him at all and just left without another word. I was too tired for another argument, which is why I left them alone, or else they would have heard it from me. Anyway, I drove to my parents' house directly afterward and handed over the money to them. It was expensive to take care of my brother, and I wanted to help them out in whichever way I could. They thanked me for it and got pretty emotional as well because of how hard I was fighting for the sake of my family. I really didn't think that what I'd done was a big deal, but apparently it was to my parents. I'm glad that they appreciate what I'm doing and hope that my brother gets better soon enough. I'm chilling at home with my dog right now, and I'm planning to take off with him for a short road trip soon so I get some time away from all this. I love my family, but I need some time as well now. Update 4. Hey folks, I'd left on the road trip this weekend and hadn't allowed any calls from anyone apart from my parents, so I was completely out of the loop. Neither did I have any social media for a while so I could detoxify properly. So yesterday, when I finally came back home with my dog, I was shocked to my core to find out that my husband and his girlfriend were being sued by his parents. It had turned out to be pretty big news, and literally all our common friends were gossiping about it. I'd received several texts from at least 10 different people asking me about it, and 10 more from people who just wanted to gossip about it and thought that I'd know more than I was letting on. It was crazy because my ex-husband was the golden child of his parents, and if they were suing him, it was obviously a huge deal and he'd messed up big time. From what I've heard so far, he'd been borrowing money from his parents to pay for everything, and it finally added up to how he could afford his lifestyle. His parents had finally asked him to pay the money back to them, but he refused, and that's how this happened. I couldn't believe that someone his age was using his parents' money and blowing it all on fancy stuff, and of course, his girlfriend. I know my friend doesn't earn much, and she certainly couldn't afford those earrings she was wearing the last time I saw her with her salary, so it was obviously my ex's money. Or his parents' money, to be more precise. I can't say I'm surprised because he always had been a spoiled brat and wanted the best of everything without actually working for it. I'm ignoring any questions about him because I don't want to end up gossiping about him, because while I don't like him, I'm also not interested in talking crap about him. He's in enough trouble as it is, and that's good enough for me. I'm not the kind of person who gossips, and I'm going to keep it that way no matter what. But in better news, my brother is getting better. Slowly but steadily, he's making progress, and he's even gained back a lot of the weight he'd lost earlier, which is really heartening to know. My parents are keeping me updated, and I'm hoping that my brother can resume working and stuff soon enough. We're just lucky that my parents and I have enough money, and also that he wasn't into worse drugs, honestly. I'm feeling a lot better now that things are finally falling into place for me and my family. I'm thankful for all of this, and I'm hoping we stay on the right track now. Update 5. Hey, I'm back again because of the sheer audacity that my ex-husband has. He reached out to me a few days ago because I'd forgotten to block him. He was calling me to ask for help with money since I owed him that after everything that we'd been through. Like, yeah, right, everything that we'd been through. More like everything that he'd put me through. He'd never cared about me or even thought about me once before going ahead and cheating on me with my friend. And on top of that, he'd even been taking money from me to fund his affair. And for whatever reason, he still believes that I owe him something. I deserved the house and the car after what he'd done to me, so he shouldn't act like he did me some huge favor. And it wasn't even as if he'd let me have it. He'd fought for it tooth and nail during our divorce and tried to retain it, but lucky for me, that didn't happen. It was crazy that he was still calling me and asking me for help with money, claiming that I owed it to him. I couldn't believe his guts and didn't even dignify his demand with a response. I hung up immediately and blocked his number, hoping that he'd take the damn hint and wouldn't contact me anymore. But of course, that idiot just couldn't accept the fact that we were done and ended up coming over to my place to ask for help. I didn't let him in and told him that if he tried to bother me any more, then I'd definitely call the cops on him. Unfortunately, he has no self-respect and started begging me to lend him some money so he can at least find a good lawyer to get him out of this mess somehow. I couldn't believe that he still expected help from me, and I almost laughed out loud. I know it sounds like I'm being cruel and heartless, but honestly, if you guys knew what I'd been through during our divorce, then people probably would have been egging me on to be even more cruel to him and make him feel worse somehow. I didn't do that, though, and merely warned him once more, after which he left. I'm hopeful that this will be our last interaction and I won't ever have to see him again. But on a good note, my brother's doing better and has even started working as a waiter at a local restaurant. It doesn't pay much, but it's a start and it's the best that he can do now. My dog also chewed his first pair of shoes. He somehow got a hold of my old trainers last night, so I guess we're all hitting very important milestones right now, LOL. Anyway, I'm guessing this is going to be the last update for a while. Actually, scratch that. I'm really hoping that it is because I don't think I want more drama beyond this point now. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.